The smell of charcoal and mesquite smoke filled the Texas air as I watched my sister Vanessa arrange her perfectly manicured hands around a glass of champagne, positioning herself for yet another Instagram photo. The golden hour light cast everything in that filtered glow she craved, and I could practically see the hashtags forming in her mind. Cash family time # blessed life # ranch vibes. What she didn't know was that this would be the last photo of our family gatherings she'd ever post. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Diana Rodriguez, and I'm about to tell you how I poisoned our family BBQ. But not with anything you'd find in a chemistry set. What I used was far more potent, and the effects lasted much longer than any toxin ever could. The Rodriguez family annual BBQ at Uncle Vincent's ranch had been a tradition for 15 years. Every July, we'd gather at his sprawling property outside Austin, where the main house sat like a monument to his construction empire. Vincent Rodriguez had built half the commercial buildings in downtown Austin, and his success had become the family's security blanket. For some of us, it had become a crutch. I stood near the pool area, watching my 6-year-old niece Chloe splash in the crystal clear water while her nanny supervised from a shaded lounge chair. Even at a family gathering, Vanessa couldn't be bothered with actual childcare. She was too busy curating content for her lifestyle blog, Living Luxe with Vanessa, which boasted about authentic family moments she rarely actually experienced. "Diana, could you move? You're blocking my shot." Vanessa's voice carried that familiar edge of irritation she reserved specifically for me. She held her phone at arm's length, angling for the perfect selfie with Uncle Vincent's prize-winning roses in the background. The thorns seemed fitting. I stepped aside without comment, used to being treated like furniture that occasionally needed repositioning. At 28, I'd learned that family gatherings were performances where I played the role of the invisible sister. Vanessa was the star, our parents were the proud supporting cast, and I was relegated to background extra. The irony wasn't lost on me. While Vanessa documented her authentic life for thousands of followers, I was the one who'd actually built something real. My graphic design business might not have been Instagram-worthy, but it paid my bills and gave me genuine satisfaction. Every client logo I created, every website I designed, represented work I'd earned through talent and persistence. No family money, no monthly allowances, just the satisfaction of building something from nothing. But at family gatherings, none of that mattered. Success was measured differently here, and Vanessa's metrics always came out on top. Her lifestyle blog generated decent ad revenue, though I suspected most of her luxurious lifestyle was funded by the monthly checks Uncle Vincent sent. The designer handbags, the lease on her BMW, the private preschool for Chloe, none of it added up with her actual income. "Vincent, you have to see Vanessa's latest post about sustainable living," my mother Linda called out, her voice carrying across the patio. She got 5,000 likes in 2 hours. Uncle Vincent looked up from the massive grill where he was preparing his famous brisket, genuine pride lighting up his weathered face. At 62, he'd never married or had children of his own, so he'd poured his paternal instincts into his brother's family. Unfortunately, that generosity had created a monster in Vanessa and enablers in my parents. "That's wonderful, Mia," Uncle Vincent beamed, using the endearment that always made Vanessa light up. "You're making such a positive impact online." I bit back the urge to mention that Vanessa's sustainable living post had been sponsored by a fast fashion company known for exploitative labor practices. The cognitive dissonance was staggering, but pointing it out would make me the villain who couldn't appreciate her sister's success. My father Robert approached with 2 bottles of beer, offering one to Uncle Vincent. "She's always been our little entrepreneur," he said, completely ignoring the fact that I was standing 10 feet away, running an actual business that didn't depend on family subsidies. The conversation continued around me, about me, but never including me. They discussed Vanessa's latest brand partnerships, her growing follower count, her plans to expand into lifestyle coaching. Meanwhile, my recent contract with a major Austin tech startup, my biggest client to date, went unmentioned because I'd stopped trying to share my achievements years ago. The pattern was always the same. Vanessa's smallest accomplishments received parade-level celebration, while my genuine milestones were met with polite nods and swift topic changes. It was as if acknowledging my success might somehow diminish hers, and the family had collectively decided whose achievements mattered more. "Diana, could you grab more napkins from the kitchen?" Vanessa called out, not bothering to look up from her phone where she was editing her latest video. "The ones by the pool are getting soggy." I was a guest at this gathering, not the hired help, but I found myself walking toward the house anyway. The pattern was so ingrained that resistance felt more exhausting than compliance. In the kitchen, surrounded by Uncle Vincent's custom cabinets and granite countertops, I allowed myself a moment of frustration. Through the window, I could see the perfect tableau of family happiness that would undoubtedly appear on Vanessa's social media within hours. Uncle Vincent flipping meat on the grill, my parents laughing at something Marcus said, Chloe playing in the pool with floaties that probably cost more than most people's monthly grocery budget. The American dream, Rodriguez family style. But I knew the real numbers. As Uncle Vincent's designated bookkeeper for the past 3 years, a responsibility I'd taken on during his mild heart scare, I'd seen exactly where his money went. Vanessa's monthly allowance had grown from $2,000 to $5,000 over the past 18 months. My parents received $3,000 monthly for their retirement supplement, though Dad was only 58 and in perfect health. Meanwhile, my own relationship with Uncle Vincent consisted of business meetings where we reviewed his accounts and discussed his estate planning. Professional, cordial, but lacking the warmth he showed his other beneficiaries. He respected my work ethic, but somehow that translated to expecting more from me, while giving less in return. The napkins were in the outdoor entertaining cabinet, not the kitchen, but the walk had given me time to compose myself. As I headed back outside, I overheard a conversation that stopped me in my tracks. "Vincent, you need to think about scaling back Diana's involvement in your financial affairs," my mother was saying, her voice low but audible through the patio doors. "She's getting too comfortable having access to everything. It might give her ideas." "What kind of ideas?" Uncle Vincent asked, though his tone suggested he wasn't entirely dismissive of the concern. "Money changes people," my father added. "Diana's always been independent, maybe too independent. Having that much insight into your finances, it's a lot of temptation for someone who's used to scraping by." I stood frozen in the doorway, napkins clutched in my hand, processing what I was hearing. They were suggesting I might steal from Uncle Vincent. Me, the one person in the family who'd never asked him for anything beyond fair payment for my bookkeeping services. "She does ask a lot of questions about the estate planning," Uncle Vincent mused, and I could hear the doubt creeping into his voice. "Always wants to understand every detail." Because she's professional, I wanted to shout, because I take your financial security seriously. But I remained silent, listening to my own family plant seeds of suspicion about my character. "Maybe it would be better to have a proper accounting firm handle things." Vanessa's voice joined the conversation. "Diana means well, but this is getting pretty complex for someone without formal training." The irony was breathtaking. Vanessa, who'd never balanced a checkbook in her life, was questioning my qualifications. The woman who thought budgeting meant choosing between the blue or black version of the same designer purse was offering financial advice. "You might be right," Uncle Vincent said slowly. "I'll think about it." I backed away from the door, my heart pounding with a mixture of rage and disbelief. After 3 years of meticulously managing Uncle Vincent's accounts, catching billing errors that saved him thousands, and helping him navigate complex investment decisions, my own family was orchestrating my dismissal based on nothing but their own projections. But there was something else in their concerns, something that revealed more than they'd intended. They were worried about what I knew, and they should be, because I knew everything. Every dollar that flowed from Uncle Vincent's accounts to theirs, every justification they'd given for needing more money, every lie they'd told about their circumstances. I walked back outside with the napkins, my expression carefully neutral. The conversation had already moved on to safer topics, and everyone greeted me with the same casual indifference as always. But something fundamental had shifted. For years I'd accepted my role as the family outsider, the one who didn't quite fit the mold they'd created. I told myself it was because I was different, more independent, less willing to play their games. Now I understood the truth. They didn't exclude me because I was different. They excluded me because I was dangerous. I was the only one who could see through their carefully constructed facade, and they knew it. "Diana, come get in the pool with me," Chloe called out, her voice bright with the uncomplicated joy of childhood. For a moment I considered joining her, losing myself in the simple pleasure of playing with my niece. But Vanessa was already moving toward the pool, camera ready to capture the perfect aunt-niece moment for her content. "Maybe later, sweetheart," I called back, settling into a lounge chair where I could observe the performance unfolding around me. But my mind was elsewhere, processing what I'd learned and considering my options. Uncle Vincent approached with a plate of his famous brisket. The meat so tender it fell apart at the touch of a fork. "Try this," he said, settling into the chair beside me. I think I finally perfected the rub. The gesture was kind, but I couldn't help analyzing it through the lens of what I'd just overheard. Was this Uncle Vincent's way of maintaining normalcy, while he figured out how to gracefully remove me from his financial affairs? Or was he genuinely unaware of how his family was manipulating his perceptions? "It's delicious," I said, and it genuinely was. Uncle Vincent took pride in his cooking the same way he took pride in his construction business: attention to detail, quality ingredients, and the satisfaction of creating something lasting. "You should write down that recipe." "I've been meaning to," he replied, watching as Vanessa posed Chloe for another photo opportunity. "Family recipes should be passed down right." The comment felt loaded with meaning, though I wasn't sure if that was intentional or my own paranoia talking. Everything felt different now that I knew how precarious my position in this family really was. As the afternoon wore on, I found myself studying each family member with new clarity. My parents, who'd retired early thanks to Uncle Vincent's generosity, were now comfortable enough to worry about protecting their position. They saw my
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
financial knowledge as a threat to their security, so they were working to eliminate that threat before it could materialize. Vanessa was more complex. Her lifestyle brand depended on projecting success and happiness, but beneath the surface, I could see the anxiety that drove her constant need for validation. Every photo had to be perfect, every caption carefully crafted to maintain the illusion. She couldn't risk having someone around who knew the difference between her online persona and her reality. Marcus, Vanessa's husband, seemed largely oblivious to the undercurrents of family politics. He worked in sales for a medical device company, made decent money, but not enough to support Vanessa's lifestyle without Uncle Vincent's help. He went along with whatever kept his wife happy and his daughter in private school, and Uncle Vincent himself remained an enigma. He built his wealth through hard work and smart business decisions, but his family had become his blind spot. He wanted to believe in their success, their happiness, their gratitude for his support. Questioning that would mean acknowledging that his generosity had created dependency rather than growth. The sun began to set over the ranch, casting long shadows across the perfectly manicured grounds. Soon this gathering would end, and everyone would return to their regular lives. Vanessa would post her curated photos, my parents would settle back into their comfortable retirement, and Marcus would return to work with a satisfied smile, knowing his family's needs were met. But something had been planted today. Something that would grow in the darkness like a poisonous mushroom. The seeds of doubt about my trustworthiness had been sown, and I had no doubt they would take root. Within weeks, I'd probably receive a polite email from Uncle Vincent thanking me for my service and informing me that he'd decided to work with a professional firm moving forward. The thought should have devastated me. Losing that income would hurt, and losing Uncle Vincent's trust would hurt even more. But instead I felt something unexpected: relief. For 3 years, I'd watched my family's financial dynamics with growing unease, knowing that the current situation was unsustainable, but feeling powerless to address it. Now they'd handed me the perfect opportunity to step back and let natural consequences take their course. And I had something they didn't know about, something that would make their betrayal far more costly than they could imagine. As Uncle Vincent began shutting down the grill and Vanessa gathered her photography equipment, I made my decision. If my family wanted to play games with trust and loyalty, I was ready to show them exactly what those games cost. The poison I was about to introduce to their perfect little system wouldn't kill anyone, but it would certainly cure them of some dangerous illusions. The Rodriguez family BBQ tradition was about to get a lot more interesting. The drive back to downtown Austin felt different that night. The city lights blurred past my windshield as I navigated the familiar route from Uncle Vincent's ranch to my apartment, but my mind was racing with possibilities I'd never allowed myself to consider before. For 3 years, I'd maintained meticulous records of every financial transaction, every transfer, every questionable expense that flowed through Uncle Vincent's accounts. What had started as professional thoroughness was about to become something much more powerful. My apartment building sat in the heart of the East Austin Arts District, a converted warehouse that housed creative professionals like myself. The monthly rent was reasonable, the location was convenient for client meetings, and I'd earned every square foot through my own work. No family subsidies, no monthly allowances, just the satisfaction of independence that my relatives seemed incapable of understanding. I climbed the stairs to my third-floor unit, my laptop bag heavy with more than just computer equipment. Inside were backup drives containing 3 years of Uncle Vincent's financial records, meticulously organized and backed up according to proper business practices. What my family had dismissed as excessive attention to detail was about to become their worst nightmare. The next morning arrived with the oppressive heat that made Austin summers legendary. I settled at my kitchen table with coffee and opened my laptop, pulling up the spreadsheets that told the real story of the Rodriguez family finances. The numbers were even more damning than I'd remembered. Vanessa's lifestyle blog, Living Luxe with Vanessa, claimed to generate income through sponsorships and affiliate marketing. Her media kit boasted about authentic content creation and genuine product recommendations, but the financial reality was starkly different. Her business account showed sporadic deposits that barely covered her website hosting costs, while her personal account received regular $5,000 transfers from Uncle Vincent's primary business account. The creativity and expense justifications was almost admirable. Marketing consultation for construction projects was code for Vanessa's monthly allowance. Family event coordination covered the elaborate parties she threw for her blogger friends. Educational expenses for family development paid for Chloe's exclusive Montessori school, which charged more per month than many people made in salary. My parents' situation was equally fictional. Their retirement consulting fees of $3,000 monthly were supposedly compensation for Dad's advice on Uncle Vincent's business decisions. The reality was that Dad had never worked in construction, had no relevant experience, and offered no actual consulting services. The money simply allowed them to maintain their comfortable lifestyle without touching their actual retirement savings. But the most interesting discovery was hidden in a series of property transfers and investment account movements. Uncle Vincent had been quietly restructuring his assets, consolidating properties and investments in ways that suggested serious estate planning. He wasn't just thinking about reducing family support, he was preparing for something bigger. My phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. "Hope you had fun yesterday. Can you send me those cute pics of Chloe by the pool? Need them for today's post about family time." The audacity was breathtaking. Less than 24 hours after orchestrating my potential dismissal from Uncle Vincent's financial affairs, she was asking for favors as if nothing had happened. I scrolled through my camera roll, found the photos she wanted, and sent them without comment. Let her post about authentic family moments, while I prepared to show her what authenticity actually cost. Another message came through, this one from my mother. "Diana, your father and I were thinking it might be good for you to take a step back from Vincent's bookkeeping. You're so busy with your own business, and we worry about you taking on too much responsibility. We know someone who could help." The manipulation was expertly crafted. Frame it as concern for my well-being, suggest I was overwhelmed, and offer a solution that conveniently removed me from the equation. If I hadn't overheard their conversation, I might have been touched by their apparent care for my workload. I typed and deleted several responses before settling on something diplomatically neutral. "That's thoughtful of you to be concerned. I'll discuss it with Uncle Vincent when we have our quarterly review next week." What they didn't know was that the quarterly review had been scheduled for today. Uncle Vincent preferred Monday morning meetings to start the week with clear financial understanding. By this afternoon, I would either be confirmed in my position or gracefully dismissed, but either way, I'd have the opportunity to share some interesting observations about family financial patterns. The Rodriguez Construction Company offices occupied a modern building in South Austin, all glass and steel, that reflected Uncle Vincent's success and attention to contemporary design. I'd been coming here for years, but today felt different as I walked through the lobby with my carefully prepared presentation materials. Uncle Vincent's office commanded a view of the Austin skyline, with the state capitol visible in the distance. He stood behind his desk reviewing construction plans when his secretary ushered me in, and his greeting was warm but somehow more formal than usual. "Diana, punctual as always," he said, gesturing to the conference table where we usually conducted our meetings. "I have to say, your reports are always so thorough. Sometimes I think you know my finances better than I do." The comment felt like a test, and I responded with professional confidence. "That's the goal, Uncle Vincent. Complete transparency and accurate record-keeping protect both of us." We began with the usual review of monthly expenses, quarterly projections, and investment performance. Everything proceeded normally until we reached the section covering family financial support. This was where Uncle Vincent typically glazed over, trusting that his generosity was being put to good use without examining the details too closely. "I've been thinking about this section," he said, his finger tracing the line items that represented thousands of dollars flowing to my parents and sister each month. "Maybe it's time to evaluate whether this level of support is still appropriate." Here was my opening, delivered more perfectly than I could have orchestrated. "That's an interesting point," I replied, pulling out a supplementary report I'd prepared. "I actually have some analysis that might help inform that decision." The spreadsheet I placed before him showed 3 years of family financial patterns in stark detail. Income versus expenses, lifestyle inflation over time, and most importantly, the growing gap between stated reasons for support and actual usage of funds. These numbers show that family support has increased 47% over the past 3 years. I explained, my voice steady and professional. But the justifications haven't changed. Same consulting fees, same educational expenses, same marketing costs. Either the scope of work has dramatically expanded, or the compensation has become disconnected from the services provided. Uncle Vincent studied the charts with the same intensity he brought to construction blueprints. His business acumen, dulled by family loyalty, was sharpening as he processed the implications of what I was showing him. This column shows lifestyle expenses that correlate directly with support payments. I continued, pulling up Vanessa's social media posts on my tablet. Designer purchases, luxury travel, restaurant bills at places that cost more per meal than many families spend on groceries per week. All occurring immediately after monthly transfers. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Years of financial generosity had funded lives of artificial luxury while the recipients claimed to be building independent success. Uncle Vincent's construction business profits were subsidizing an elaborate performance of achievement. "Why are you showing me this?" Uncle Vincent asked quietly, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. This was the moment that would define everything that followed. I could take the diplomatic route, express concerns about sustainability and suggest gradual changes. Or I could acknowledge the real reason we were having this conversation and address it directly. "Because I overheard an interesting discussion at yesterday's BBQ, I said, maintaining eye contact. "About my supposed untrustworthiness and the need to remove me from your financial affairs before I get dangerous ideas about your money." Uncle Vincent's expression didn't change, but I saw recognition flash in his eyes. He'd been present for that conversation, had participated in it, and now understood that I knew exactly what had transpired. "They're not wrong to be concerned," I continued. "I do have dangerous ideas. I think you deserve to know where your money actually goes. I think family members who accept financial support should be honest about their circumstances. And I think 3 years of detailed records paint a pretty clear picture of who's been trustworthy in this situation." The silence stretched between us as Uncle Vincent processed what I'd said and what it meant. Finally, he leaned back in his chair and asked the question I'd been waiting for. "What do you recommend?" This was where I could have sought revenge, demanded immediate action, or forced dramatic confrontations. Instead, I reached for a different kind of poison, one that would work slowly but thoroughly. "I recommend transparency," I said, pulling out another document. "Complete disclosure of financial arrangements to all parties involved. Let everyone see exactly how much support they're receiving and how they're using it. Let the numbers speak for themselves." Uncle Vincent took the document, which outlined a comprehensive financial transparency plan. Monthly reports to all family members showing total support provided, stated justifications, and actual usage patterns. Regular reviews to ensure support levels matched stated needs. And most importantly, clear expectations for progress toward financial independence. "This would make everything visible," he said, understanding the implications immediately. "Exactly, no more wondering about appropriate levels of support. No more assumptions about need or progress. Just clear information that allows everyone to make informed decisions about their financial relationships." The beauty of this approach was its apparent reasonableness. Who could object to transparency and clear communication about financial arrangements? Anyone who protested would immediately reveal their preference for maintaining beneficial deceptions. "I'll need to think about this," Uncle Vincent said, but his tone suggested the decision was already made. "And I'll need to discuss it with the family." "Of course," I replied, beginning to pack up my materials. Though I should mention that implementing this system would require continued detailed record keeping and analysis. If you're planning to transition to a different bookkeeper, they would need complete access to historical data and ongoing transaction details. The implication was clear. Removing me from his financial affairs would be much more complicated than my family had assumed, especially if Uncle Vincent wanted to implement new levels of oversight and transparency. They'd maneuvered to eliminate the person who could expose their financial deceptions, only to discover that exposing those deceptions was exactly what Uncle Vincent now wanted to do. "Let's continue our current arrangement for now," Uncle Vincent said. "This level of analysis requires someone who understands the full context of our financial history." I nodded professionally, but internally I felt a surge of satisfaction. My family's attempt to remove me had backfired spectacularly, strengthening my position while simultaneously creating the framework for their downfall. As I left the office, I could see Uncle Vincent still studying the financial transparency proposal. By evening, he would likely have made his decision about how to proceed. By the end of the week, my family would discover exactly what their betrayal had cost them. The drive back to my apartment gave me time to consider what came next. I'd set events in motion that couldn't be stopped, introduced a poison into the family system that would slowly but surely cure them of their comfortable illusions. The antidote to years of deception was truth, and I'd just provided Uncle Vincent with a concentrated dose. My phone remained silent that afternoon, which was telling in itself. Usually family members would text throughout the week, sharing updates about their activities or asking small favors. The silence suggested they were waiting to see how their machinations played out, confident that by next week they'd have successfully eliminated the threat I represented to their financial arrangements. They had no idea that their perfect plan had just become their perfect destruction. The poison was already working, spreading through the system with the quiet efficiency of truth encountering lies. Soon they would discover that authenticity was far more toxic to their artificial lives than any chemical compound ever created. The Rodriguez family was about to learn that some poisons cure diseases, burning away infections that have festered too long in darkness. And I was about to discover exactly how satisfying the role of healer could be, even when the medicine tasted bitter to those who needed it most. By Wednesday, Uncle Vincent had made his decision. The email arrived in my inbox at exactly 9:47 on Wednesday morning, marked with high importance and carbon copied to every adult member of the Rodriguez family. Uncle Vincent's message was brief but devastating in its clarity. Effective immediately, all family financial arrangements will be subject to new transparency protocols. Monthly reports will detail support provided, stated purposes, and actual usage. First comprehensive review scheduled for this Friday at 2 p.m. Attendance mandatory for all current support recipients. Diana will present the analysis. I stared at the screen, reading the message 3 times before the full impact registered. Uncle Vincent hadn't just accepted my transparency proposal, he'd weaponized it. Making me the presenter meant my family would have to sit through a detailed exposition of their financial deceptions, delivered by the person they'd tried to eliminate from the equation. My phone erupted within minutes. Vanessa's name flashed on the screen, but I let it ring through to voicemail. Then Dad called, followed immediately by Mom. Each call went unanswered, while I savored the sound of their mounting panic. Finally, a text message arrived from Vanessa that perfectly captured their collective hysteria. "What did you do? Vincent wants to review everything. This is insane. Call me back right now." The desperation was palpable even through text. For years my family had operated under the comfortable assumption that Uncle Vincent's generosity came without scrutiny. They'd crafted elaborate justifications for their support payments, but those justifications were built on the foundation that no one would ever examine them closely. Now someone was going to examine them very closely indeed, and that someone was the family member they'd just betrayed. I spent Wednesday morning preparing what I privately called the Reckoning Report. 3 years of financial data arranged in chronological order, showing not just the numbers but the patterns of behavior that emerged from those numbers. Charts that demonstrated how family members' spending habits correlated directly with Uncle Vincent's support payments. Timelines that revealed how quickly emergency financial assistance became routine monthly expectations. The most damning evidence came from cross-referencing their social media activity with their financial records. Vanessa's Instagram posts provided a perfect timeline of luxury purchases that coincided exactly with Uncle Vincent's transfers. Designer handbags photographed within days of receiving marketing consultation payments. Vacation photos tagged with locations that cost more than most people's annual salaries, funded by family event coordination fees. My parents' financial fiction was equally transparent once the numbers were laid bare. Dad's supposed consulting for construction projects had generated exactly 0 documented communications, 0 meeting records, and 0 deliverables beyond cashing Uncle Vincent's checks. Their retirement lifestyle, funded by monthly transfers, included country club memberships, luxury cruises, and premium healthcare plans that bore no relationship to their actual retirement savings. But the most interesting discovery was hidden in the patterns of escalation. Each family member's requests for support had grown progressively more elaborate over time, as if Uncle Vincent's initial generosity had been interpreted as permission to dream bigger and spend more freely. What started as occasional assistance had evolved into permanent lifestyle subsidies that none of them could afford to lose. Thursday brought a flood of increasingly desperate communications. Vanessa's messages oscillated between fury and pleading, sometimes within the same text. "This is completely unfair. You're destroying our family over jealousy. Please don't do this to Chloe." The mention of my niece was a calculated manipulation, but it also revealed how completely Vanessa misunderstood the situation. This wasn't about jealousy or revenge. This was about consequences, something my family had successfully avoided for years through careful management of Uncle Vincent's emotions and expectations. My parents tried a different approach, appealing to family loyalty and tradition. "Diana, we've always been proud of your independence, but this feels vindictive. Vincent is upset and talking about cutting support entirely. Think about what this means for all of us." The irony was exquisite. The same independence they'd dismissed as stubbornness was now something they claimed to admire, while simultaneously asking me to abandon it in service of protecting their financial arrangements. They wanted me to value family loyalty while ignoring their complete lack of loyalty toward me. Marcus sent the most honest message, which earned him a grudging respect I hadn't expected to feel. "Diana, I know yesterday's conversation at the BBQ was wrong. Vanessa is panicking about losing her lifestyle funding, and your parents are terrified about their retirement security. But Chloe doesn't deserve to suffer because of adult mistakes. Can we find a way to handle this privately?" His acknowledgement of wrongdoing was refreshing, but his solution missed the fundamental issue. There was no private way to handle systematic financial deception. Either Uncle Vincent deserved to know how his money was being used, or he didn't. Either family members were accountable for their stated needs and progress toward independence, or they weren't. I responded to Marcus with more consideration than I'd shown the others. The transparency protocols aren't punishment, they're clarity. Everyone will understand exactly where things stand, which should reduce confusion and conflict going forward. The response was technically true while being completely disingenuous. Clarity would indeed reduce confusion, but it would dramatically increase conflict as everyone's carefully maintained fictions collapsed under scrutiny. Friday morning arrived with the oppressive humidity that made summer in Austin feel like breathing through wet cotton. I dressed carefully for the meeting, choosing a professional outfit that projected competence and authority. Today I wouldn't be the invisible sister relegated to background status. Today I would command the room. Uncle Vincent's conference room had been arranged with military precision. A large screen for displaying financial data, printed copies of key reports for each attendee, and a seating arrangement that positioned me at the head of the table with Uncle Vincent to my right. The message was clear. This was my presentation, backed by his authority. Vanessa arrived first, her usual polished appearance slightly frayed at the edges. Dark circles under her eyes suggested she'd slept poorly, and her designer outfit looked like armor chosen for battle. She took a seat as far from me as possible, and immediately began scrolling through her phone, probably checking whether any of her blogger friends had posted content she could envy or critique. My parents entered together, their expressions carefully neutral in that way, that suggested hours of strategic discussion. They'd clearly decided on a united front approach, presenting themselves as reasonable adults willing to cooperate with whatever Uncle Vincent required. Dad carried a legal pad, as if he planned to take notes on his own financial deceptions. Marcus came in looking genuinely uncomfortable, which I appreciated. His discomfort suggested actual understanding of the situation's gravity, unlike his wife's visible anger, or my parents' calculated cooperation. He nodded politely in my direction, and I returned the gesture with professional courtesy. Uncle Vincent entered last, carrying himself with the quiet authority that had built his construction empire. He'd changed since our Monday meeting, carrying himself like a man who'd made difficult decisions and was prepared to implement them regardless of the personal cost. "Thank you all for being here," he began, settling into his chair with deliberate calm. "I've asked Diana to present a comprehensive analysis of our family financial arrangements. This information will help all of us make informed decisions about appropriate levels of support going forward." The room's temperature seemed to drop several degrees. Vanessa's phone disappeared into her purse, and my parents' expressions shifted from neutral cooperation to barely concealed alarm. Only Marcus maintained his composure, though his knuckles were white where he gripped his chair arms. I stood and activated the presentation screen, displaying the first slide, Rodriguez Family Financial Analysis. The title alone was enough to make Vanessa shift uncomfortably in her seat. This analysis examines stated justifications for financial support, actual usage patterns, and progress towards stated independence goals. I began, my voice carrying the same professional tone I used for client presentations. The data spans 36 months and includes cross-reference documentation from multiple sources. The first section covered Vanessa's business arrangements. Her Living Luxe with Vanessa blog was presented in stark financial terms: claimed revenue versus actual revenue, stated business expenses versus personal purchases, projected growth versus measurable results. The numbers painted a picture of elaborate fiction masquerading as entrepreneurial success. Monthly support payments categorized as marketing consultations total $60,000 annually, I explained, highlighting the relevant figures. During this same period, documented business revenue averaged $400 monthly, primarily from affiliate commissions on lifestyle products. Vanessa's face had gone pale, but she maintained her composure through visible effort. The gap between her projected success and financial reality was now displayed for everyone to see, quantified in charts that couldn't be disputed or explained away. Cross-referencing social media content with purchase timelines reveals consistent patterns, I continued, displaying a timeline that showed Vanessa's luxury acquisitions occurring within days of receiving Uncle Vincent's transfers. Designer purchases, premium dining experiences, and luxury travel consistently correlate with support payment dates. The evidence was overwhelming and methodically presented. Each chart built on the previous one, creating an undeniable narrative of financial dependency disguised as business success. Uncle Vincent studied each slide with the same attention he gave construction blueprints, occasionally making notes on his copy of the report. Moving to my parents' arrangements, I presented their retirement consulting fees with equally devastating clarity. Consulting payments totaling $36,000 annually were categorized as compensation for business advice and strategic planning services. Documentation review reveals 0 meeting records, 0 deliverable reports, and 0 measurable consultation activities. Dad's legal pad remained blank as he stared at the screen, showing his complete lack of actual work product despite years of payments. His consulting existed only in the fictional job descriptions used to justify Uncle Vincent's generosity. Retirement lifestyle expenses funded through these payments include country club memberships, luxury travel, and premium healthcare supplements. I explained, showing how their actual spending patterns revealed the true nature of the support relationship. The most damaging section covered lifestyle inflation across all family members. Charts showed how each person's expenses had grown progressively more elaborate over time, as if Uncle Vincent's initial assistance had been permission to dream bigger and spend more freely. Support recipients have increased their lifestyle expectations by an average of 47% over 3 years, while stated progress toward financial independence has remained essentially static, I concluded, displaying a summary chart that crystallized the entire problem in stark visual terms. The room was completely silent as I presented the final slide, Recommendations for Sustainable Family Financial Relationships. The recommendations were reasonable and professionally presented, but their implications were revolutionary for people accustomed to unexamined support. Transparent monthly reporting of support usage, measurable progress goals toward independence, and regular review of support levels based on demonstrated need rather than requested amounts. I read from the slide. These protocols ensure family financial relationships remain healthy and sustainable for all parties. Uncle Vincent was the first to speak after I concluded the presentation. "Thank you, Diana. This analysis is exactly what I needed to understand our current situation." He turned to address the rest of the table with quiet authority. "Are there any questions about the data presented?" The silence was deafening. What questions could they ask? The numbers were accurate, the documentation was complete, and the patterns were undeniable. Years of carefully managed financial fiction had been reduced to irrefutable mathematical truth. Finally, Vanessa found her voice, though it came out strained and defensive. This feels like an attack on our family relationships. Since when do we audit each other's personal lives? Since we decided to accept financial support based on stated business needs and progress claims, I replied calmly. Transparency protects everyone involved. But you're making us look like freeloaders, she continued, her voice rising slightly. We have genuine expenses and real financial pressures. The analysis doesn't make judgments, I responded, maintaining professional neutrality. It simply presents accurate information about stated justifications versus actual usage patterns. My parents tried a different approach, appealing directly to Uncle Vincent's emotions. Vincent, we're grateful for everything you've provided, Mom said carefully. But this level of scrutiny feels punitive. We're family, not business associates. Uncle Vincent's response revealed how thoroughly my presentation had changed his perspective. Family members deserve honesty about their financial relationships, he said quietly. Business associates would never accept the level of deception revealed in this analysis. The poison was working exactly as I'd intended. Not the dramatic explosion of anger or accusation, but the slow, methodical introduction of truth into a system built on comfortable lies. Each fact presented had been undeniable, each conclusion supported by mathematical certainty. Going forward, monthly support will be contingent on meeting specific transparency and progress requirements. Uncle Vincent announced. Diana will continue managing financial oversight to ensure these standards are maintained. With those words, my family's attempt to eliminate me from Uncle Vincent's financial affairs had achieved the exact opposite result. I was now not just his bookkeeper, but the official guardian of family financial accountability. The very position they'd tried to destroy had become more powerful and entrenched than ever. As the meeting concluded and family members filed out in stunned silence, I felt the satisfaction of a plan executed perfectly. The BBQ conversation that had seemed like my downfall had become the catalyst for their reckoning. Sometimes the most effective poison was simply the truth, administered in carefully measured doses until the patient was cured of their illusions. The Rodriguez family was about to discover exactly how expensive deception could be. The first casualty was Vanessa's Instagram feed. For someone whose life revolved around curating the perfect online presence, the sudden silence was more telling than any dramatic announcement could have been. Her last post, a carefully staged photo of organic groceries with the caption "Sustainable living starts with conscious choices," remained pinned at the top of her feed like a monument to irony. I discovered the depth of the damage 3 weeks after the transparency meeting when Chloe's private school called Uncle Vincent directly. The tuition payment was 60 days overdue, and they needed immediate resolution to avoid impacting the child's enrollment. When Uncle Vincent forwarded me the email for handling, I realized that Vanessa had been hiding the financial crisis from everyone, including her husband. Marcus called me that evening, his voice heavy with exhaustion and something approaching defeat. Diana, I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth. How bad is our situation really? The question revealed the extent of Vanessa's deception. She hadn't just been lying to Uncle Vincent about her business success, she'd been lying to her own husband about their family's financial dependence. Marcus had believed his wife was contributing meaningfully to their household income, not realizing that his salary barely covered their mortgage while Uncle Vincent funded everything else. The school payment is $12,000 past due, I told him, sticking to facts rather than judgments. Your credit cards are carrying balances that total more than your annual income. And without Uncle Vincent's monthly transfers, you'll default on your mortgage within 90 days. The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long, I wondered if the call had dropped. Finally Marcus spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. She told me the blog was making money. Real money. She showed me screenshots of payment notifications, talked about brand partnerships and growth projections. The screenshots were from affiliate commissions, I explained gently. Small amounts, usually under $50. The brand partnerships were free products in exchange for posts, not paid sponsorships. The growth projections were aspirational rather than based on actual data. Another long silence. Then Marcus asked the question that revealed how completely his world had shifted. What do I tell Chloe? She's 6 years old. She doesn't understand why suddenly we can't afford her school or her dance classes or the vacation we promised her. The pain in his voice was genuine, and I felt the first stirring of something that might have been regret. Chloe was innocent in all of this, a victim of adult deceptions and power struggles. But then I remembered that every dollar spent on her luxury lifestyle had been taken from Uncle Vincent under false pretenses, funded by elaborate lies about business success and family needs. You tell her the truth, in age-appropriate ways. I said finally. That sometimes families need to make changes, and those changes can lead to different kinds of happiness. Marcus laughed bitterly. Different kinds of happiness. Right. Try explaining that to a 6-year-old who's about to lose everything she's ever known. After ending the call, I sat in my apartment wondering if I'd unleashed something more destructive than I'd intended. The transparency protocols were working exactly as designed, forcing family members to confront the gap between their stated circumstances and financial reality. But the human cost was becoming more visible, and it was higher than I'd anticipated. My parents' adaptation was proving even more dramatic. The country club membership was canceled first, followed by their premium cable package and the cleaning service that had maintained their suburban home. Dad had started looking for part-time work for the first time in 3 years, scrolling through job listings with the bewildered expression of someone who'd forgotten what employment actually required. Mom called me on a Thursday morning, her voice carrying a brittleness I'd never heard before. Diana, I need to ask you something about the financial arrangements. Is there any flexibility in the transparency requirements? Maybe some way to demonstrate progress that doesn't involve such detailed reporting. The question revealed that she still didn't fully understand the situation. The transparency wasn't negotiable, because it was the only way to ensure honesty in financial relationships that had been built on systematic deception. Without detailed reporting, the same patterns would inevitably re-emerge. The requirements are designed to protect everyone, I explained. Uncle Vincent deserves to know how his support is being used, and you deserve to understand what's expected in return for that support. But it feels so impersonal, she continued. Like we're strangers being audited rather than family members receiving help. Mom's strangers don't lie to each other about business success or consulting services that don't exist, I replied, allowing a slight edge to enter my voice. The reporting requirements exist because family trust was violated, not the other way around. The conversation ended shortly after that, with Mom making polite but strained promises to comply with whatever Uncle Vincent required. But I could hear the resentment building in her voice, the anger that comes when comfortable lies are replaced with uncomfortable truths. The most unexpected development came from Uncle Vincent himself. During our regular Monday meeting, he seemed different, more contemplative than I'd seen him since implementing the transparency protocols. He'd been studying the monthly reports with unusual intensity, and I sensed he was processing more than just financial data. Diana, I need to ask you something, he said, setting down the latest family financial summary. When you prepared that comprehensive analysis, what were you hoping would happen? The question was more complex than it appeared. He wasn't asking about my professional objectives or analytical methods. He was asking about my personal motivations, whether I'd intended to destroy family relationships or simply expose them. I was hoping for honesty, I answered carefully. Financial relationships built on false assumptions eventually collapse anyway. Transparency just accelerates the process and allows for better decisions. Uncle Vincent nodded slowly, but his expression suggested he was wrestling with implications beyond financial management. I've been thinking about my role in all of this. My generosity enabled the deception, didn't it? If I'd required accountability from the beginning, none of this would have been necessary. The observation was perceptive and painful. Uncle Vincent's kindness had indeed created the conditions for systematic manipulation. His desire to help family members had been exploited by people who learned to craft increasingly elaborate justifications for continued support. Good intentions don't always produce good results, I said diplomatically. But recognizing problems is the first step towards solving them. The thing is, Uncle Vincent continued, I don't just want to solve the financial problems. I want to understand how family relationships became so transactional. When did love become contingent on money? When did my relatives start seeing me as a resource to be managed rather than a person to be genuine with? The questions revealed the deeper wound that my transparency protocols had exposed. Uncle Vincent wasn't just discovering financial deception, he was confronting the reality that his family's affection might have been purchased rather than earned. Maybe the relationships were always transactional, I suggested gently. Maybe the money just made the transaction more obvious. Uncle Vincent was quiet for a long time after that, staring out his office window at the Austin skyline. Finally he turned back to me with something approaching resolve in his expression. I want to make some changes to the family financial arrangements, he said. More significant changes than just transparency requirements. The announcement didn't surprise me, but the timing did. I'd expected Uncle Vincent to gradually reduce support levels as family members failed to meet progress requirements. Instead, he seemed to be preparing for something more dramatic. What kind of changes? I asked. Complete cessation of support for 6 months, he replied. No monthly transfers, no emergency assistance, no special circumstances exceptions. Let everyone experience their actual financial situation without any safety net. The proposal was more extreme than anything I'd suggested, but it made sense from a behavioral psychology perspective. As long as family members knew Uncle Vincent's support was available, they would continue to structure their lives around that expectation. Only complete removal would force genuine adaptation. That's a significant decision, I said carefully. Are you prepared for the consequences? Uncle Vincent's smile was sad but determined. I'm 72 years old, Diana. I won't live forever, and I need to know that my family can survive without my financial support. This seems like the kindest way to find out. The logic was unassailable, but the human impact would be devastating. Vanessa would lose her house, my parents would be forced to liquidate retirement assets, and Marcus would have to rebuild his entire understanding of his family's financial situation. But the alternative was allowing the deception to continue until Uncle Vincent's death made it irrelevant. When would this take effect? I asked. Immediately, Uncle Vincent replied. I'll send notification this afternoon. The September transfers will be the last ones. That evening I prepared for the explosion I knew was coming. Uncle Vincent's email would arrive in family inboxes like a financial earthquake, destroying assumptions and forcing immediate crisis management. The comfortable lies that had sustained everyone for years would collapse in a matter of hours. The first call came from Vanessa at 7:30, her voice pitched higher than I'd ever heard it. Diana, you have to fix this. Vincent says he's cutting everyone off completely. This is insane. We'll lose everything. The decision isn't mine to make or unmake, I replied calmly. Uncle Vincent consulted with me about the financial analysis, but the support decisions are entirely his choice. But you influenced him, she accused, her voice rising to near hysteria. You poisoned him against his own family with your spreadsheets and charts. This is all your fault. The accusation was interesting because it contained a grain of truth. I had poisoned the family system, but not with lies or manipulation. I'd poisoned it with accuracy, with transparency, with the simple demand that financial relationships reflect reality rather than comfortable fiction. Vanessa, the spreadsheets just showed what was already happening, I said. Uncle Vincent made his decision based on information he deserved to have. Information you chose to present in the most damaging way possible, she shot back. You could have found a way to help us transition gradually, but you wanted revenge for that stupid conversation at the BBQ. She wasn't entirely wrong about my motivations, but she was wrong about the ultimate necessity of the outcome. The family's financial arrangements had been unsustainable regardless of my personal feelings. The transparency protocols had simply accelerated an inevitable reckoning. My parents' reaction was more controlled but equally desperate. Dad sent a carefully worded email requesting a meeting to discuss alternative arrangements that might meet Vincent's accountability requirements while preserving family relationships. Mom followed up with a phone call that barely concealed her panic beneath layers of practiced politeness. Diana, surely there's some way to demonstrate good faith without cutting off support entirely, she said. Your father has been looking at consulting opportunities that could justify continued payments. The suggestion revealed how completely she misunderstood the situation. The problem wasn't finding ways to justify Uncle Vincent's support. The problem was that the family had built unsustainable lifestyles based on unearned income. No amount of creative accounting would change that fundamental reality. Mom, the issue isn't justification for payments, I explained. The issue is dependence on payments that were supposed to be temporary assistance. But we're not young anymore, she replied, her voice carrying genuine fear. Starting over at our age is terrifying. We planned our retirement around Vincent's support. The admission was heartbreaking and infuriating in equal measure. They'd built their golden years on the assumption that Uncle Vincent's generosity would continue indefinitely, without ever considering whether that assumption was fair to him or sustainable for them. Marcus's response was the most mature of all the family reactions. He sent a brief text message that simply said, "I understand why this had to happen. We'll figure it out." His acceptance didn't mean the situation wasn't devastating for his family, but it suggested he recognized the relationship between choices and consequences in ways that others couldn't seem to grasp. The real test would come in the following weeks, as family members were forced to confront their actual financial situations without the safety net they'd taken for granted. Some would adapt and rebuild on more sustainable foundations. Others would continue looking for ways to avoid the hard work of genuine independence. But the poison had been administered, and there was no antidote except the painful process of healing. The Rodriguez family was about to discover what they were really made of when the money stopped flowing and only their authentic character remained. 6 months without Uncle Vincent's financial support transformed the Rodriguez family in ways that no amount of spreadsheets or transparency reports could have predicted. The changes weren't just financial, they were fundamental alterations in identity, relationships, and the very fabric of who each person believed themselves to be. Vanessa's transformation was the most dramatic and in many ways the most painful to witness. The woman who had built her entire public persona around luxury lifestyle content found herself moving from her West Lake Hills McMansion to a modest 2-bedroom apartment in South Austin. The downsizing wasn't just about square footage, it was about dismantling an entire fictional identity that had been constructed around other people's money. I drove past her new apartment complex one evening in October, curious about how she was adapting to her changed circumstances. The building was clean and well-maintained, but a world away from the sprawling home with its professional landscaping and 3-car garage that had served as the backdrop for countless Instagram posts. I wondered what stories she was telling herself about this transition, whether she'd found ways to frame it as a conscious choice rather than an inevitable consequence. The answer came through Chloe, who started attending the same public elementary school where I volunteered as a reading tutor. Seeing my niece in this new environment was initially jarring. Gone were the designer uniforms of her previous private academy, replaced by the cheerful chaos of children from working-class families who shopped at Target and considered McDonald's a special treat. But Chloe seemed to be thriving in ways I hadn't expected. During one of our tutoring sessions, she mentioned almost casually that she and her mom had been learning to cook together, something that had never happened during their catered lifestyle phase. "Mommy says we're having adventures," Chloe explained with the adaptability that makes children so much more resilient than adults. "Yesterday we made pancakes from scratch and they were lumpy, but we laughed a lot." The image of Vanessa laughing over imperfect homemade pancakes was so different from her previous existence that it felt like hearing about a completely different person. The woman who had once photographed artisanal pastries from expensive bakeries was now creating genuine memories through trial and error in a cramped apartment kitchen. Marcus had found work with a smaller medical device company that required more travel, but offered the possibility of commission-based earnings that could eventually replace Uncle Vincent's support. During a brief conversation at Chloe's school pickup, he shared insights that revealed how much their family dynamics had shifted. "The weird thing is that Vanessa seems happier," he admitted, lowering his voice as if confessing something scandalous. "She's not constantly checking her phone or worrying about getting the perfect shot of everything. She's present in ways she hasn't been for years." The observation aligned with something I'd noticed about social media culture through watching my sister's previous lifestyle. The constant pressure to document and curate every experience often prevented people from actually experiencing those moments authentically. Without the financial resources to maintain her online image, Vanessa had been forced to step back from performing her life and start living it instead. Her Instagram account remained dormant, but through mutual acquaintances I learned that she'd started a blog focused on budget-friendly family activities around Austin. The content was completely different from her previous luxury lifestyle posts, featuring free museum days, public park adventures, and home cooking experiments. The audience was much smaller, but the engagement seemed more genuine, filled with comments from other parents sharing their own money-saving discoveries. My parents' adaptation followed a different trajectory, one marked by more resistance and considerably more drama. The transition from comfortable retirement to actual employment had been traumatic for people who'd assumed their working years were behind them. Dad had found part-time work at a home improvement store, a job that utilized his general construction knowledge while forcing him to interact with customers who had no idea about his previous lifestyle or expectations. The psychological adjustment was enormous. Dad had spent 3 years presenting himself as a successful retiree who occasionally consulted on construction projects. The reality of wearing a name tag and helping weekend DIY enthusiasts select paint colors required a complete recalibration of his self-image. Mom had taken a position at a local library, work that she claimed to enjoy, but that clearly challenged her assumptions about the type of employment appropriate for someone of her social standing. The conversations I overheard during family gatherings revealed ongoing tension about their changed circumstances. "I never thought I'd be working at my age," Mom confided during a brief phone call in November. "It's not that the work is terrible, but I feel like we've gone backward in life. Like all our previous achievements don't matter anymore." The sentiment revealed a fundamental misunderstanding about what constitutes genuine achievement versus artificial elevation through financial support. Their previous lifestyle hadn't been earned through their own efforts. It had been a gift from Uncle Vincent that they'd gradually begun treating as an entitlement. "Maybe going backward isn't always a bad thing," I suggested carefully. "Sometimes you have to return to solid ground before you can build something that lasts." The conversation ended shortly after that, with Mom making polite but strained promises to stay in touch. I could sense her processing the implications of my comment, trying to reconcile her desire for sympathy with the growing awareness that their situation was largely self-created. But the most surprising development came from observing my parents' relationship with each other. The financial stress that I'd expected to drive them apart seemed instead to be drawing them together in ways I hadn't seen since childhood. They were planning meals together, sharing household chores that they'd previously outsourced, and spending evenings at home rather than at expensive restaurants or entertainment venues. During Thanksgiving, which was held at my apartment for the first time in family history, I noticed small interactions that revealed positive changes beneath the surface complaints. Dad complimented Mom's cooking with genuine appreciation rather than polite acknowledgement. Mom listened to Dad's work stories with actual interest rather than distracted patience. They were relating to each other as partners facing shared challenges rather than individuals maintaining separate areas of comfort. The holiday gathering itself was radically different from previous years. Instead of the elaborate ranch BBQ with its performative abundance, we shared a modest meal that everyone had contributed to preparing. Vanessa brought homemade rolls that were slightly lopsided but delicious. My parents provided a green bean casserole, made from a recipe Mom had found online, rather than ordered from a caterer. Even the conversation was different. Without the backdrop of luxury and the pressure to maintain appearances, family members seemed more willing to engage in authentic discussion. We talked about books we'd been reading, local events we'd discovered, and plans for the future that were grounded in realistic assessments of our capabilities, rather than wishful thinking about continued financial support. Chloe, who had initially been devastated by the changes in her life, seemed to have found stability in the new family dynamics. She talked enthusiastically about her public school friends, her after-school art class at the community center, and the weekend camping trip she and her parents were planning using borrowed equipment. "Aunt Diana, did you know that s'mores taste better when you make them yourself?" she asked during dessert, referring to a recent family camping experiment. "Mommy tried to buy the fancy ones from the store, but they weren't as good as the ones we made over the fire." The comment perfectly captured the unexpected benefits of financial limitation. Experiences that required creativity and effort often proved more memorable and satisfying than expensive alternatives that required no personal investment beyond payment. Uncle Vincent had maintained minimal contact with family members during the 6-month support suspension, a decision that required considerable willpower given his natural inclination toward generosity. Our monthly business meetings continued, but he rarely discussed the family situation beyond reviewing the basic financial data I provided. In December, however, he asked me to prepare a comprehensive analysis of how each family member had adapted to their changed circumstances. The request suggested he was considering whether to resume some level of support, and if so, under what conditions. The analysis revealed patterns that were both encouraging and concerning. All family members had successfully reduced their expenses to match their actual income, proving that adaptation was possible when no alternatives existed. Employment rates had increased dramatically, with even Vanessa exploring freelance opportunities that utilized her social media skills in more sustainable ways. But the emotional adjustment remained incomplete for some family members. My parents, while functionally adapting to their new circumstances, continued to express resentment about the situation and hope for restored support. Their adaptation felt more like temporary endurance than genuine acceptance of changed circumstances. Vanessa and Marcus, by contrast, seemed to be building something genuinely different. Their marriage appeared stronger, their family relationships more authentic, and their future planning more realistic. The crisis had forced them to confront fundamental questions about values and priorities, and their answers seemed to be leading toward more sustainable choices. What do you think? Uncle Vincent asked after reviewing the analysis. Are they ready for graduated reintroduction of support, or do they need more time to solidify these changes? The question forced me to confront my own motivations and biases. 6 months earlier, I'd introduced transparency protocols with the goal of exposing financial deception and forcing accountability. The plan had succeeded beyond my expectations, but the human cost had been higher than I'd anticipated. I think the answer is different for each family member, I replied carefully. Some have learned lessons that will protect them from repeating previous patterns. Others might interpret renewed support as validation that their previous approach was acceptable. Uncle Vincent nodded thoughtfully. What about you, Diana? How has this experience changed your perspective on family financial relationships? The question was more personal than our usual business discussions, but I sensed he was genuinely curious about my evolution through this process. The woman who had poisoned the family BBQ with transparency protocols wasn't quite the same person who was now evaluating the results of that decision. I've learned that being right about financial problems doesn't automatically make you right about the best solutions to those problems, I admitted. The transparency was necessary, but the human relationships are more complicated than spreadsheets can capture. Do you regret what you did? I considered the question seriously before answering. The past 6 months had been painful for everyone involved, but they had also revealed truths about family dynamics that would have remained hidden otherwise. Vanessa was becoming a more authentic person, my parents were rediscovering genuine partnership, and Uncle Vincent was learning to distinguish between helpful support and enabling dependency. I regret some of the pain it caused, I said finally. But I don't regret the honesty. Everyone is dealing with reality now instead of comfortable illusions. Uncle Vincent was quiet for several minutes, staring out his office window at the Austin skyline that he'd helped build through decades of honest work. Finally, he turned back to me with something approaching resolution in his expression. I want to restart support for the family, but with very different parameters, he announced. Smaller amounts, clear time limits, and specific goals for independence. What do you think about that approach? The proposal made sense from both financial and psychological perspectives. Complete withdrawal of support had forced a necessary adaptation, but gradual reintroduction could help stabilize positive changes without recreating previous dependencies. I think it could work, I replied. But only if the support is clearly temporary and tied to measurable progress toward genuine independence. That's exactly what I had in mind, Uncle Vincent said. And I want you to continue overseeing the financial relationships, but with expanded authority to recommend changes based on what you observe. The offer was both a professional opportunity and a personal responsibility that felt heavier than my original bookkeeping duties. I would essentially become the guardian of family financial health, with the power to influence decisions that affected everyone's quality of life. Are you sure you want me in that position? I asked. It's not going to make me popular with family members who want more support or fewer restrictions. Uncle Vincent's smile was tired but genuine. Diana, you're the only person in this family who has consistently told me the truth about money. I trust your judgment more than anyone else's, including my own, when it comes to family emotions. The conversation led to a new financial arrangement that balanced support with accountability in ways that addressed the lessons learned during the 6-month suspension. Vanessa and Marcus would receive limited assistance for Chloe's educational expenses, but only if they could demonstrate continued progress in building sustainable income through their own efforts. My parents would receive modest support for healthcare expenses that exceeded their insurance coverage, but their housing and lifestyle costs would need to be covered through their own employment and savings. The days of country club memberships and luxury vacations funded by Uncle Vincent were permanently over. The new arrangements were announced during a January family meeting that felt markedly different from the devastating transparency presentation 8 months earlier. Family members listened to the proposals with what appeared to be genuine gratitude, rather than entitled expectation. The 6 months of complete independence had apparently taught everyone to value support, rather than assume it. Vanessa's response was particularly striking. "Thank you for giving us another chance," she said simply. "I know we took advantage of your generosity before, and I understand why you needed to stop it." The acknowledgement of wrongdoing was something I'd never heard from her previously. The woman who had once justified elaborate spending through creative business expense categories was now accepting responsibility for the deception that had damaged family relationships. My parents' response was more guarded, but still represented significant progress from their previous attitudes. "We appreciate whatever support you're willing to provide," Dad said carefully. "We've learned that we can survive on our own income, so anything additional is a blessing rather than a necessity." The distinction between blessing and necessity represented a fundamental shift in understanding that had been missing from previous financial arrangements. Support was once again recognized as generosity rather than obligation, which changed the entire dynamic of family relationships. As winter gave way to spring, the Rodriguez family settled into new patterns that reflected hard-earned wisdom about money, relationships, and the dangers of comfortable self-deception. The poison I'd introduced at that fateful BBQ had done its work, burning away the infections of entitlement and dishonesty that had threatened to destroy genuine family bonds. Vanessa's blog about budget-friendly family activities had developed a modest but loyal following, and she was exploring opportunities to monetize her content in legitimate ways. Her Instagram account remained largely dormant, but the few posts she did share focused on genuine moments rather than curated lifestyle performance. My parents had found stability in their new employment and seemed to be rediscovering aspects of their relationship that had been obscured by years of artificial comfort. Their complaints about working in their 60s had gradually been replaced by pride in their ability to contribute meaningfully to their own financial security. Uncle Vincent appeared more relaxed than I'd seen him in years, freed from the constant worry about enabling destructive behavior, while still able to provide meaningful support to family members who were building genuine independence. And I had learned that sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for people is to stop protecting them from the consequences of their choices. The transparency protocols that had seemed so harsh 8 months earlier had created space for authentic relationships to develop, based on honesty rather than financial manipulation. The Rodriguez family BBQ tradition resumed that July, but it was held at a public park rather than Uncle Vincent's ranch. Family members contributed potluck dishes instead of expecting catered abundance, and the conversation focused on shared experiences rather than individual achievements, requiring external validation. Watching Chloe play with children from diverse economic backgrounds, seeing Vanessa and Marcus work together to set up their picnic area, and observing my parents enjoy simple pleasures without the pressure to document everything for social media, I realized that the poison had ultimately been a cure. We had all been infected with false ideas about success, happiness, and family loyalty. The medicine had tasted bitter, and the treatment had been painful, but the Rodriguez family had emerged healthier, more authentic, and more capable of genuine love than we'd been when our relationships were mediated by monthly financial transfers. Sometimes the most toxic thing in a family system is the comfortable lie that allows everyone to avoid confronting reality. And sometimes the most healing intervention is the simple introduction of truth, administered with precision, and allowed to work its slow but thorough transformation. The BBQ that day tasted better than any of the elaborate meals we'd shared during the years of artificial abundance. Not because the food was more expensive or expertly prepared, but because it was shared by people who knew and accepted each other's authentic selves, rather than carefully maintained performances. As the sun set over Austin and family members began cleaning up our modest picnic, I felt the deep satisfaction that comes from difficult work completed successfully. The Rodriguez family had survived their encounter with honesty, and we were all stronger for having faced the truth about who we really were when the money stopped flowing and only our genuine character remained. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up, just click and check them out.